scared mini-alien girl begged for mercy, but the human shocked everyone. The alien marketplace was full of noise and colors. Strange smells filled the air, and creatures from many planets walked around. But in the center of it all, one thing was different. A small cage, made of rusted metal, sat on top of a dirty wooden table. Inside the cage, a mini-alien girl sat with her knees pulled to her chest. She was no taller than a human toddler, maybe 3 feet at most. Her skin was light blue, her hair white and messy. Her big black eyes were wet with fear. The auctioneer shouted, "Rare creature from the lost zones. Look at this beauty." Crowds gathered, laughing, throwing coins at the cage. Some poked sticks through the bars. The little girl whimpered, but no one cared. "She's not dangerous," one buyer said. "Good for display." Another chuckled. The auctioneer smiled. "She's obedient, small, and very quiet. She won't scream unless you tell her to." She did not understand all their words, but she felt the cruel energy. She wrapped her arms around her legs and whispered in her own language, "Please, not again." Suddenly, the crowd parted as a human man walked forward. He was tall, but not big. His clothes were simple, his face quiet, but his eyes, sharp and calm, did not match the rest of him. "What is this?" the human asked, stopping in front of the cage. The auctioneer smiled. "One-of-a-kind creature. Sir, very rare, very cheap today." The human didn't smile. He looked down at the alien girl, who was trembling in the corner of the cage. "Let her go," he said softly. The crowd laughed, thinking it was a joke. The auctioneer raised an eyebrow. "You wish to buy her?" "No," the human replied. "I said let her go." "Then you're wasting time." Someone from the crowd yelled, "Move along, hero," another mocked. But the human didn't move. Instead, he reached inside his coat and pulled out a badge. The auctioneer's face changed, so did the crowd's. The badge wasn't from this city, or even this planet. It was from Earth Defense Command, High Authority Clearance. The human spoke again, his voice calm. "She's not a pet. She's not a product. She's a child." The auctioneer swallowed hard, trying to smile again. "But she's not registered. No ID chip. No records." "That's not her fault," the human said. "I'm taking her with me." There was silence. No one dared to stop him now. The auctioneer opened the cage slowly, stepping back. The little girl screamed and covered her head, thinking more pain was coming. But the human didn't touch her. He knelt beside the cage and placed a small food bar on the floor. She peeked at him with one eye, shaking. He didn't force her. He didn't speak. He just waited. After a few seconds, she crawled forward and snatched the bar, then rushed back to her corner. She chewed fast, like someone who hadn't eaten in days. He watched her, not saying a word. Then he stood up and said, "She comes with me." The auctioneer nodded silently. The crowd moved away, whispering, watching. The human picked up the cage gently. He didn't close it, didn't lock it. He just carried it carefully and walked out of the marketplace without looking back. As they moved through the streets, the alien girl looked up at him. Her hands still held the food, but her eyes held confusion. "Why not hurt?" she asked in broken translator speech. The human looked at her and said, "Because you're safe now." She didn't understand everything, but she understood one word, safe. And for the first time in a long while, she believed it. That night stars shined above the quiet planet, and in a small rented room, the tiny alien girl fell asleep on a clean bed. The human sat nearby, guarding her like a silent wall. He didn't know her name yet, didn't know her past, but one thing was clear. He had seen her cry. He had seen the fear in her eyes, and he had made a decision. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt her again. Not while he was breathing. The room was quiet, except for the soft breathing of the alien girl. She lay curled on one side of the bed, wrapped tightly in a blanket. Her eyes blinked slowly, still unsure if she was dreaming. She had been hurt before, tricked before, but this place felt different. The human man sat on a chair near the door, watching over her without speaking. He hadn't asked her anything, hadn't touched her. He just sat there, calm. Like a mountain that would not move, the girl stared at him through the dim light, her voice small. You own me. The human shook his head slowly. No one owns you, he said. She didn't understand. She tilted her head. Confused. Then why take me? The human looked at her with tired eyes. Because no one else did, he answered. She sat up slowly, her limbs thin and weak. She still held the food bar from earlier, half-eaten. Her voice was shaking, but she forced the question out. You will hurt me later. The human stood and walked to a small cabinet. He opened it and took out a round device. With a click, it lit up, translating languages in real time. He handed it to her, carefully, not forcing. When she pressed it against her neck, the device clicked and beeped. Her words came clearer now. She repeated, "Will you hurt me later?" The human sat back down, sighing. "No," he said simply. "I won't." She looked down, her fingers curling around the edge of the blanket. "I have been sold 5 times, she whispered. "Each one worse than the last," they said. "They would be kind too." The human didn't reply right away. He let the silence stay. Then he said, "I don't want anything from you. I just couldn't walk away." She didn't believe him, not fully, but her heart, tired and broken, wanted to. "Your name?" she asked. "Dorian," he said. "And you?" She hesitated. "I don't remember," she said. "They took my name." Dorian leaned forward a little, his voice soft. "Then you can choose a new one." She looked shocked. "A name? For me? Yours to keep." He nodded. Her lips parted slightly, unsure what to say. He got up and moved to a drawer, pulling out another food bar. He placed it near her side of the bed. She flinched at first, but he backed away quickly, showing no threat. She picked it up slowly, smelling it, then took a small bite. "You are strange," she said quietly. "You are not like the others." "I'm human," he replied. "We don't do things like them." She frowned. "They say humans are weak, easy to break, too soft." Dorian chuckled softly. "Maybe that's what makes us dangerous." Suddenly, the room's lights flickered. She gasped and pulled the blanket around herself. "It's okay," Dorian said, standing quickly. "It's just the generator." But she didn't relax. She stared at the window, wide-eyed. "They're looking for me," she whispered. "They will come." Dorian's expression changed. His jaw tightened. "Who?" he asked. She hugged herself tightly. "Hunters." He walked over to a small panel near the door and tapped it. Security grids lit up outside the building. Lasers formed a protective net, the windows sealed with thick shutters. "No one gets in," he said calmly. She stared at the shielded window, still shaking. "They always get in." Dorian knelt beside the bed. "Not too close. I promise you," he said. "They'll have to get through me first." She stared at him, silent for a long time. Then for the first time, she reached out. A trembling hand. Dorian didn't grab it. He just held his palm open, letting her touch it herself. Her tiny fingers brushed against his, then rested there, unsure but willing. A connection had formed, not of control, not of fear, but of something new, something rare in her world, trust, and outside, far beyond the safety of that room. Ships were already coming, hunters tracking the stolen cargo, but what they didn't know was that the cargo had found a protector, and the protector was human. The night was cold, even inside the small metal shelter. Dorian sat near the wall, eyes half closed but still alert. The girl who had not yet chosen a name lay on the bed, not sleeping, just staring at the ceiling. She had never seen such quiet before. No screams, no cages, no shouting voices. It was strange. It was peaceful, but peace was not something she trusted yet. Her small fingers traced the edge of the translator on her neck. She whispered softly, "Why are you doing this, human?" Dorian didn't move, but he heard her. He replied without looking. "At her? I told you," he said. "Because no one else did." She sat up slowly, knees pulled to her chest. Her voice was stronger now. I'm not worth saving. I'm broken. I'm not even from a strong species. Dorian opened one eye and looked at her. You were in a cage, he said. That doesn't mean you belong there. She paused, then asked something she hadn't dared before. What is Earth like? He leaned his head back and smiled. Softly, blue skies, loud cities, strong music, he said, and people who argue a lot, but still help each other when it matters. Her eyes widened. Music. Dorian nodded. I'll let you hear some later. Before she could answer, the warning light above the door blinked red. Dorian stood fast and moved to the screen. He pressed a button and the image appeared. A small ship was hovering above the building. No signal, no ID, no voice transmission. She rushed to the window, peeking from behind the curtain. Her heart dropped. That's them, she whispered. They always fly silent. Dorian didn't panic. He moved fast, grabbing a small black case from the wall and opening it. Inside were old Earth weapons, still in working shape. He picked one and handed another to her. She stared at it, confused. I don't know how to fight. I didn't ask you to, he said. He knelt and looked her in the eyes. But I need you to trust me now, like I trusted you. Her hands trembled as she held the weapon, unsure, but she nodded slowly. Outside, the ship lowered, metal claws extended, slicing into the roof. Dorian stepped to the center of the room. The walls began to hum with the energy barrier he'd activated earlier, but he knew that wouldn't stop them for long. Do you know why? They're hunting you, he asked, without looking back. She was silent, then her voice came low and hollow. I wasn't supposed to survive. I am the only one left from my bloodline, if I live. Their throne falls. Dorian's grip on the rifle tightened. So she wasn't just a slave, or a prisoner. She was the last piece of something powerful. Why didn't you tell me before? He asked. She stared at the floor. I didn't think you'd believe me. I thought you would sell me like the others. His voice came firm. You don't need to prove yourself to me. You're not just worth saving. You're worth fighting for. Outside, the ship dropped two dark figures onto the roof. Black armor, red visors, plasma blades in hand. Dorian heard the sound of metal boots above him. He turned to the girl and said, If anything happens to me, run. Don't stop. But she didn't answer. She stepped beside him, her little body shaking but her voice clear. I'm tired of running, she said. I'll stay. Dorian smiled, just slightly. Then let's show them what a human and a broken alien girl can do. The roof exploded, and the battle began. But for the first time in her life, the girl didn't scream, because for the first time, she wasn't alone. She had a warrior beside her, and he was human. Smoke filled the small room, thick and bitter. Chunks of the ceiling crashed down as the intruders landed with force. Dorian pushed the girl behind him, shielding her with his body. The air sizzled from plasma heat, and the floor trembled with each step the hunters took. Two black figures emerged through the broken roof. No words, no warnings, just glowing blades and heavy footsteps. Dorian raised his weapon and fired first. Blue sparks flew from the lead hunter's chest, but the creature didn't fall. The second hunter moved fast, crashing through the desk and sending debris flying. Dorian ducked and rolled, pulling the girl with him. Her small hand gripped his tightly, but she didn't cry, not this time. They slid into the back room, where an emergency panel waited. Dorian slammed his hand on it, sealing the metal door behind them. We only have minutes, he said, panting. They'll break through. The girl looked at the panel, her eyes wide. I can help, she whispered. She walked to the wall, placed her palm on a strange metal ring. The ring pulsed blue, scanning her blood, her DNA. A second door behind the storage crates opened silently. Dorian looked surprised. You knew about this? She shook her head. No, she said softly, but it knew me. Inside the hidden room was something unexpected. A long console, glowing with ancient alien script. In the center hovered a sphere of light, spinning slowly, humming like a living heart. The girl stepped forward, her fear replaced by a strange calm. "This was built by my ancestors," she said. "They used it to speak across worlds. I thought all of this was gone." Dorian walked to her side, scanning the room with alert eyes. "What does it do?" "It's a beacon," she said, "but not just any signal. It calls to allies." Behind them, a loud crash echoed, the metal door buckling. "They don't want me to send the signal," she added. "They don't want anyone to know I'm still alive." Dorian looked at her with steady eyes. "Then maybe it's time they knew." He handed her a small device. "Press this when I say." She nodded, hands shaking slightly, but eyes locked on the glowing sphere. Another crash. Then sparks. Then silence. Dorian stepped to the doorway, rifle ready. The hunters burst in with fury, blades drawn, but this time, he wasn't just protecting her, he was buying her time. He fired shot after shot, every hit slowing them down. One blade nicked his shoulder, tearing through his jacket. Blood spilled, but he didn't stop. He shouted over his shoulder. "Now!" The girl pressed the device, and the sphere pulsed bright white. A low sound filled the room, deep and powerful. The hunters froze, their armor flickering. The light from the beacon pushed them back like a wave. They screamed, voices distorted, then vanished in a flash of white. Gone, just like that. Silence returned, broken only by Dorian's heavy breathing. He turned around, blood running down his arm. "You okay?" he asked. The girl stared at the sphere, glowing now with golden light. "I remember my name," she whispered. It was hidden inside the signal. Dorian stepped closer, voice gentle. "What is it?" She looked at him and said, "Alira." He smiled through the pain. "That's a good name." She looked at him with soft eyes. "You got hurt? Because of me. And I'd do it again," he said without hesitation. The sphere pulsed once more, then projected a map into the air. Dozens of glowing dots appeared, ships moving toward their location. Not enemies, but allies. The signal had worked. Alira's voice trembled as she whispered, "They're coming. The last of my people. They heard me." Dorian leaned against the wall, tired but smiling. "Well," he said, "let's welcome them." And for the first time, Alira didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt like a princess, a survivor. And beside her stood a man who had nothing to gain, yet risked everything, because he was human, and humans don't turn away from those who need help. The stars above the valley shifted slowly as night turned to morning, but neither Dorian nor Alira slept. They sat beside each other, quiet, watching the soft golden light from the ancient beacon fade. The room now felt warmer, not from heat, but from something deeper. For the first time, Alira wasn't looking over her shoulder. For the first time, she wasn't afraid to close her eyes. But she didn't. She kept staring at Dorian's injured arm, guilt heavy in her chest. "Why? Did you really help me?" she asked, voice low. "I wasn't special to you. Not then." Dorian looked at her without flinching. "You were alone," he said, "and I know how that feels." His words were simple, but they struck something deep inside her. She looked down at her small blue hands, hands that had only known cold chains, until he broke them. She whispered, "You remind me of someone." Dorian raised an eyebrow slightly. "My brother," she said. "He tried to protect me during the last attack. He didn't make it." Dorian didn't speak. He reached into his bag and pulled out a clean cloth. He tore it into strips and began to wrap his bleeding arm. Alira stood and walked over, placing her hand on his. "Let me," she said, softly. He hesitated, then nodded. Her small fingers were careful. She tied the cloth gently, her touch barely there. He looked at her and smiled. "You're better at this than most medics I've known." A faint smile touched her lips for the first time, but it didn't last long. The console behind them beeped. A message appeared, written in the language of her people. She stepped toward it slowly, reading each glowing word. Then her face turned pale. "What is it?" Dorian asked, standing. She turned to him with fear in her eyes. "The ships that answered the beacon," she said. "They aren't all friendly." Dorian's expression darkened. "What do you mean?" She pointed to the lower corner of the map. "These ones," she said. "They are part of the Royal Purge fleet. They were the ones hunting me." Dorian stepped closer to the console, examining the symbols. "So they followed the signal too." Alira nodded slowly. "They want to kill me before the rest arrive. They want to erase the last of my family line." He tapped the console, zooming in on the incoming ships. "We have less than an hour," he muttered. Alira stepped back, her legs shaking. "I didn't mean to bring danger," she whispered. "I just wanted to live." He placed his hands on her shoulders. "Firm, but kind. You didn't do anything wrong," he said. "Let them come. We'll show them you're not alone anymore." She looked up at him with watery eyes. "You can't fight them all?" He smirked. "I'm human," he said. "Doing the impossible is kind of our thing." Alira let out a shaky breath. "Then I will fight too," she said. "I may be small, but I won't hide anymore." Together, they began to prepare. Dorian activated the last of the building's defenses. Old cannons rose from underground platforms, targeting the sky. Alira moved to the console again, hands flying across the controls. She was not just a frightened girl anymore. She was royalty, reborn in fire and light. And above them, the enemy ships closed in, fast and merciless. But on the ground stood two souls, one broken, one bleeding, both ready. Because some things are worth protecting, even if the whole galaxy says otherwise. The sound of distant thunder wasn't from a storm. It was the roar of warships entering the atmosphere. Alira watched from the rooftop as the sky turned red with light. Their engines glowed like angry stars. She had always run from these ships. Every time she heard their scream, she hid. Every time their shadow passed overhead, she froze. But not today. Below her, Dorian adjusted the power lines feeding the cannons. Sweat ran down his face, blood still fresh on his shirt. But he didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. Alira climbed down the ladder, her bare feet hitting the cold metal. She stood beside him, holding a strange device in her small hands. "I found this in the core chamber," she said. "It's old." Dorian glanced at it, then back at her. "It's a neural pulse detonator," he said, surprised. "That kind of tech hasn't been used in decades. It was built by my people," she whispered, "but only royalty can activate it." Dorian paused for a moment. "Are you sure?" She nodded slowly. "If they land, it'll disable every ship engine within range. But I have to be close." He looked at her, then at the sky. The ships were getting lower. Smoke trailed from their wings as they prepared for descent. "I'm going with you," he said, without hesitation. Alira blinked. "You don't have to." "I know," he replied, "but I will." Together they loaded a small ground skimmer, a rusted old vehicle that coughed when it started. Alira sat behind him, arms wrapped around his back as they sped across the rocky fields. Above them, the warships hovered like metal dragons, waiting to strike, but they weren't waiting anymore. Not her, not him, as they neared the enemy's landing site. Dorian slowed the skimmer and parked behind a broken ridge. He turned to Alira. "This might be the end," he said quietly. She looked up, her voice steady, or a beginning. They walked up the ridge, crouching low as 3 ships touched down. Soldiers in sleek black armor poured out. Each one carried plasma weapons and cold eyes. But none of them expected what was coming. Alira walked forward, holding the device close to her chest. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She walked, step by step, like someone born to command. One of the soldiers raised his weapon. "Return the Royal Signal Corps and we'll spare your lives," he shouted. Dorian stepped forward and fired a warning shot near his foot. "Try it," he said. "See what happens." Alira kept walking, ignoring the threats. The device in her hand began to glow. The soldiers hesitated, unsure now. This wasn't the weak little girl they were told about. When she reached the center of the landing zone, She knelt down and placed the device on the ground. The lights turned bright green. She stood tall, hands raised. "This is for every child you locked in a cage," she shouted. "This is for every voice you silenced." Dorian's eyes stayed on her, pride burning in his chest. She was no longer someone he needed to protect. She had become a force on her own. The device exploded not with fire but with light. A massive wave of white energy expanded outward. The engines of the ships sparked, then died. Soldiers screamed as their suits froze, their systems dead, their power gone. One by one, the ships fell silent. Smoke rose into the sky, and in the middle of it all, Alira stood still, shaking, but alive. Tears ran down her face, not from fear, from release. Dorian walked to her slowly. She turned and ran into his arms. He held her, arms tight around her small frame. "It's over," he said softly, but she shook her head. "No," she whispered. "It's just beginning." Behind them, the remaining soldiers dropped their weapons and ran. The purge fleet had failed. A child they thought was broken had risen, and the human they thought was weak had stood beside her to the very end. Ash drifted through the air like snow. The battlefield had gone quiet. The ships were dead, the weapons useless. The soldiers either fled or captured, and in the center of it all, Alira stood holding Dorian's hand. Her body trembled with exhaustion, her knees weak, but her eyes, those dark, star-like eyes, were no longer filled with fear. They were steady, calm, and proud. Across the hills, lights flickered in the sky, allied vessels, responding to the same beacon that once risked exposing her. Now they arrived to find not a scared little girl, but a survivor who had made her stand. Dorian watched the sky and tightened his grip on her hand. "You did it," he said. She shook her head slowly. "We did." Medical shuttles landed first, scanning the field, treating wounded. The soldiers aboard wore white armor and soft expressions. One of them knelt before Alira with bowed head. "My lady," he said, "you've returned." Alira didn't speak at first. She looked at Dorian, unsure. He gave a small nod, the kind that says you've earned this. She turned back and said, "Not just returned, I have decided who I want to be." The soldiers waited for her command, but she didn't bark orders or act like a ruler. Instead, she pointed to Dorian. "This man risked everything when no one else would. If I am royalty, then I choose him as my equal." Gasps spread through the field, not because of tradition, but because they saw something rare, a bond made not by blood or power, but by choice. Dorian rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "I'm not really the royal type," he muttered. Alira smiled. "You're the only type I trust." That night, the valley was cleared, the broken ships were towed away, and the fires were put out. A temporary base was built, and for the first time in her life, Alira had a room that didn't lock from the outside. Dorian was given a bed too, but he didn't rest much. He sat near the balcony, watching the stars above. Alira walked out quietly and sat beside him, her legs swinging off the ledge. She looked up and whispered, "Will Earth ever welcome someone like me?" He glanced at her, surprised. "Of course," he said. "They'll probably build statues of you." She laughed, soft and tired. "I don't want statues," she said. "I just want peace." They sat in silence a while longer, then Alira rested her head on his arm. "I think I finally feel safe," she whispered. He placed his hand gently over hers. "You're not alone anymore." Far above, stars blinked in quiet approval, and in a world where fear once ruled her every breath, she finally slept without chains, without cold floors, and without nightmares. Because one human made a different choice. He didn't see a prisoner, or a creature, or a royal tool. He saw a scared girl, and gave her something no one else ever had: hope.